Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sometimes Media is Just Media. I am Zach, and today we're going to be talking all about Nosferatu, directed by Robert Eggers, an adaptation of the classic film of the same name, which itself is an adaptation of Dracula by Bram Stoker. I want to start off with my general thoughts, what I would rate it or recommend, and then we'll get into spoilers. So if you don't want to stick around for spoilers, just want to real quick, should I watch this? Should I not? My answer is pretty confidently yes. Now, I will say this. The movie does deal with themes of SA, I think childhood, though the timeline's a little bit iffy on that, so I'm not quite positive. But it also talks about the way that can continue to impact a person's life into adulthood. So if you are someone that has that in your past or where that might be a trigger for you, I would simply encourage you to do a little more research. I don't think that it's an automatic no, but I wouldn't say it's an automatic yes either. Um, I think films like these can be really cathartic to survivors and help them make sense of their own experiences or give words to things that they've felt, emotions that they've carried with them. They can point at this movie and say, oh, like this character's experience, that's what I was feeling. This reaction is how I'm feeling on the inside. And I think that can be really powerful for people. But other people, you may find it a little bit triggering. You may find it a little bit upsetting, and that's okay. Everybody's going to be a little bit different in this regard, so simply do your research. If it seems like it might be upsetting to you, then you might want to give it a pass, or at least wait until you can watch it in a safe place, around safe people that can help you in that processing. For me, this is easily a top film of 2024, and so far, 2025, best film that I have seen. Hands down. The acting, the sound design, the themes, the scares, just all of it together is utterly fantastic. All right, now if you want to avoid spoilers, I would go ahead and stop watching right now because we're going to get into some of the themes of the movie, and I'm just going to kind of give a general overview of the plot and what are some things that kind of happen. So, last warning before we get into spoilers. All right, three, two, one, here we go. So, Nosferatu opens up with Ellen, played by Lily Rose Depp, calling out for an entity to help her with loneliness. And her call is answered, but it's not in the way that she wants. And we see her having her first of, well, many seizures within the movie. Fast forward a few years, and that same Ellen is now married to her husband Thomas, who's played by Nicholas Holt, and they live in Germany, where Thomas works as a real estate solicitor. Right away, if you're familiar at all with Dracula, these characters are very clearly Mina Murray, aka Mina Harker, and Jonathan Harker. Now, I will be honest as I go through this. I have not seen the original Nosferatu, the black and white one. It's on my to watch list. I promise that I will get to it. I just haven't been able to get around to seeing it yet. So I know of the plot beats that are very similar to Dracula because that is a book I have read a couple of times. And I've seen various film adaptations, stage shows, things like that. So I'm very familiar with that piece, but I'm not familiar as much with the classic original Nosferatu. So a lot of what I reference will be going back to Dracula, not the original Nosferatu. Um, so here we meet kind of the main crux of the film's plot is that Thomas needs to go to Transylvania to the castle of Count Orlok, played by Bill Skarsgård, because Count Orlok wants to move to Germany. He wants to get a house here, and He really wants a living, live solicitor to come all the way out and help him with the paperwork and do all that. He doesn't want to wait till he's in Germany. He wants this to happen right away, which Thomas feels is a little bit fishy, and Ellen clearly doesn't like, but he's very insistent, and so is his boss. So Ellen, we see, really doesn't want him to go. When she first finds out about it, she's very upset, and later she seems more resigned, more accepting of it, and this turnaround, I think, can feel very jarring to some people, but to me, it makes sense. As somebody who does a lot of work with trauma and works on understanding it, I think this is a really good depiction of a trauma response. So, when a person goes through trauma, it fundamentally alters the way our brains react to things. And things that are what we would call triggers, or things that, kind of activate those memories of that trauma, basically put our brain back in that moment where we originally experienced the trauma. So we are not dealing in the present. We're not dealing with logic. We're not dealing with rationality. We are back in the past, acting purely on emotion, which emotion in and of itself, not very logical. I always joked that if I were to ever open my own practice, that I would put on the business cards that if emotions were logical, I'd be out of a job, because emotions don't usually care about logic. They are reactions to things that are happening around us. So what happens is when you've been through an experience of trauma, you get this sense of almost your brain kind of fighting itself. So on one hand, you have the logical, rational part going, look, there is no reason for this panic. You shouldn't be worried about this. You shouldn't be freaking out. You shouldn't be having this strong reaction. And the other side, which is usually louder and a lot more powerful, screaming at you, no. If this happens, something bad is going to happen. I know something bad is going to happen. If this thing comes to pass, if I let this event happen, I will be in danger. And our brain doesn't recognize the difference between physical danger and emotional danger. Danger is danger. And so we get into that fight or flight mode. And this often creates a lot of conflict for a trauma survivor interacting with other people, because the other people around them are usually approaching it from that more logical, rational place and headspace. And the trauma survivor is going, look, you guys don't understand why this is such a big deal. And that lack of understanding can create a lot of friction and makes those relationships really difficult. And that is something you also see in the movie. As the movie goes on, Ellen, who is staying with friends of hers and Thomas's, so Friedrich and Anna Harding, played by Emma Corrin and Aaron Taylor Johnson, they try to be really understanding of what Ellen is going through. While she's staying there, she's having seizures, she's having fits, she's having all sorts of episodes and is really struggling, and they try to be there for her. They try to be patient and understanding, but you can see it's wearing on them. They're struggling with it, and ultimately Friedrich does kick Ellen out of the house, and Thomas as well, because Thomas is back by that point, and just basically completely rejects them and renounces them. And honestly, a lot of times in my experience, that moment can come a lot quicker. People really struggle to have the patience to work with somebody who is struggling from that really emotional spot. So I thought that the movie did a really good job of capturing that and illustrating a lot of what that dynamic really does look like. So, as the movie continues, Thomas goes to Transylvania, and just a personal favorite of mine. I love that they include him staying in the local village. He encounters what I think are Romani. There might be another cultural variant that they could fall under, but that Romani is the term I know, so that's what I'm going to go with. Yes, the movie does use a different term. I will not be using it. While I don't have a problem with the movie using it, because historically that was the term people would have used, in a modern age, that term isn't necessarily okay to say, so I'm not going to use it because I don't live in the time period of the movie. So I will use what would be more correct now, but you all kind of know what I mean. But yeah, I love that it helps the world building and gives the sense that, Orlok has these people who do know about him, who are aware of him, and are terrified of him, and have built rituals and beliefs and things all around who he is and what he's doing and what he's done. So that really helps for me just kind of enrich the overall world. And I also like that it gives Thomas a little bit of culture shock where he's not used to seeing these things. He's not used to these different traditions, these different belief systems. And he kind of has to adapt, and he struggles a little bit. He has a pretty rough night before he finally sets out for the castle to finally meet Count Orlok. Now, I had heard a lot about how great of a performance that Bill Skarsgård gave, but holy cow, was this so much better than anything I could have expected. There is such a commanding presence to him. He is captivating. He is unsettling. You can see how he excels as a predator because as much as you are unsettled by him, you can't help but hang on his every word. You can't help but be drawn to listen to him, and you almost can't turn away. And this is really reflected in how Thomas acts around him as well. The dude is perpetually terrified and just looks like he would rather be anywhere else or doing anything else but sitting there listening to him or doing what the Count wants, but he still has to. And what I really love is that it's never really clear. Is this just Orlok's natural gravitas and presence and commanding tone and everything about him? Or is it the fact that he's a vampire and maybe he's using some type of compulsion or trick on Thomas? You never really know. It's never explicitly stated, and I love that. Because what I hope people see, and what I really saw in this, is that this really reflects what we see in actual predators. When we hear about cases of abuse or assault where there's, somebody who is kind of this habitual predator involved, a lot of people will either say or believe or think, this idea of, yeah, but I wouldn't fall for that. I mean, just look at the person or, listen to them. You can tell they're bad news. You can tell they're creepy. You can tell you wanted nothing to do with them. And yeah, you can. But if you're an audience member and you sat there and you went, holy cow, I am riveted by this performance, guess what? That is what predators do. They draw you in exactly like that. And yes, this is a movie. Yes, this is a performance. And that does create a little bit of distance and suspension of disbelief and all of that. But it is very, very similar to what we would actually see. So if you found yourself getting drawn in by Bill Skarsgård's performance of Count Orlok, that is what it can be like to be on the receiving end of a predator. Because you also have to remember, predators are focused on their prey. If you're not prey, it is easy to get a good sense of them. But when they are focused on you, that is a completely different beast entirely. So I really appreciated that they added that in. Because, yeah, at some level you might know that a person is dangerous or a situation is dangerous, but something is compelling you to stay, regardless of, parts of your brain that might be screaming at you to run. I think it's great that they were able to capture that on film, and I think it adds such an amazing layer to the performance that really makes it all the more haunting. Um, During the time that Thomas spends with Orlok, he finds himself being a snack for the Count a few times, which I also like how they depicted it because it his has an almost sexual representation, but not in a romantic sexual way. Like a lot of times when you see vampires and it's the going for the throat, it hits a little bit differently. In this, Orlok is full on nude, straddling him, sinking his mouth into the guy's chest. And his body is doing these like rhythmic like jerks as he drinks that are almost like thrusting a little bit. It's really unsettling to watch, and not just in that sense of, oh, it's a horror movie, it's supposed to be unsettling, but in a more visceral, I'm something I shouldn't, something that feels wrong and violating to another person. And I like that they captured that because that's what assault is. It's a violation. It's a violation of a person, and it can be difficult to capture that ethically and without going over the top or making it weird or things like that. And I thought this movie did a really good job in its depiction of it by really just having it be, nope, this is exactly what it is and what it looks like. It's not pretty. Um, while all of this is happening, Ellen is not having an easy time. She's having these visceral dreams of Count Orlok, and she's having the fits and the seizures and really pushing the Hardings to their limit, like I talked about earlier. And at this point, that's where Arthur, or Friedrich Harding, I called him Arthur because I feel like that's who he's supposed to be from Dracula, is the character of Arthur. But Friedrich goes to his friend Dr. Seaver and gets help, and Seaver is also dealing with Thomas's boss, Herr Knock, who is become this movie's version of Renfield, saying the phrases like, oh, the blood is the life, really classic Dracula, Renfield lines. And they're kind of struggling with figuring out what to do with Ellen and what's going on. And it's about this time where Thomas finally escapes Orlok's castle by falling into the river, and Orlok sets sail for Germany. And we get an almost abbreviated version of Last Voyage of the Demeter from a couple years ago, which I also loved as just a big fan of the Dracula novel. Seeing what happened on that fateful voyage that's only really hinted about in books is just love it. Makes me so happy to see or to imagine what different versions could look like or be like. So please, whoever wants to tackle Dracula next, one, do it in a way that is more faithful to the book. There was so much stuff that I felt was super faithful to the original Bram Stoker book in this that I just loved. So do that, but also give us more of the Demeter, give us more of some of these things, because I think it's really interesting to see. I need it. So Thomas winds up getting rescued by nuns and brought to a church, which to me looked almost Russian Orthodox. Again, leave in the comments below if I get it right, or if I'm completely off base. My only real experience is Fiddler on the Roof. But I thought that the church from Fiddler on the Roof, the Orthodox church, there looked really similar in terms of like decor and attire and things like that. But I could be completely wrong. So leave some input in the comments below on if if I got it right, got it wrong, whatever the case may be. Anyway, Thomas almost has to get like exorcised while nursed back to health because they're trying to like purge Orlok from him. But he winds up leaving early because he knows that Count Orlok is after Ellen, after his wife. He's really caught on to that and he wants to get back as soon as possible. So, back in Germany, what they wind up doing is Sievers goes and recruits his former professor, Eberhard von Franz, played by William Dafoe, excellently. And an obvious parallel to Dr. Van Helsing. And they realize that something more is going on here. That what is happening with Ellen is not a physical malady. It's not mental health. It is something more supernatural, something more in the realm of the occult, which von Franz has been studying. In fact, they mention he's been kicked out of academia because of his obsession with the occult. And that makes the characters a little bit more skeptical of him. You know, they're not sure if they want to believe him or listen to him, and it feels like them going and talking to him is truly a last resort, that they are desperate to, see this play out. What I find interesting about the stuff with von Franz is, well, yes, in the movie it is the occult and it's not widely believed and things like that. And I'm not saying that Sievers and Harding's attitude are inaccurate or they don't make sense, but I have seen people in real life react the way that Sievers and Friedrich do to psychology, to therapy, to those type of principles because they don't believe in it. They don't believe it's a real science. And even when you can show effectiveness or you can prove some things to them, there is still that reluctance to accept it. When somebody has a really firm belief in something, it can be really hard to shake that. And I thought the movie did a really good job of showing that. They could have easily had it be that they're skeptical at first, but then von Franz proves them that he knows what he's talking about, and then they just immediately go, oh, yep, we're true believers now. And that really doesn't happen. You almost get the sense that even up until the very, very end, they're still a little bit skeptical, and they aren't quite ready to believe it. So I really liked that they showed that really accurately, even though, as an audience member, it can be frustrating because you're just like, oh my gosh, listen to him. He knows what he is talking about. Come on. So we finally get to the very end of the movie. So we've got everybody is all in Germany. They're all in the same place. And this is where the final act really kicks off. And it goes hard. It is pedal to the metal. It is entire, just a tour de force to the very end. So Orlok and Ellen in the same location. He shows up and he basically goes, I will give you 3 nights. And each night that you refuse me, I will kill someone you care about until you have nobody left. And he fully makes good on that promise. And what I like about that is what we see in predators. Predators will use threats of harming loved ones, whether that be people, pets, whatever you care about, they will use to control you. And yeah, sometimes those are idle threats, but sometimes they aren't. And that can be really scary, and that is why it can be really difficult for people to leave because they feel like they have to stay with these individuals or they have to give them what they want because otherwise other people are going to get hurt. And we do see that in the movie. Night 1, Anna gets attacked and, Anna is pregnant. I forgot to mention that earlier, but yeah, she's pregnant throughout the whole movie. Night 2, Anna is killed, and so are the Harding's two young daughters, just callously murdered by Warlock. And that's the event that really finally breaks Friedrich. That's where he kicks Ellen out. He rejects von Franz. He rejects Thomas. He rejects Sievers. He basically is completely undone at this point. And honestly, I get it. Like, dude has lost everything that mattered to him to something that he isn't even sure he fully understands or believes in. It's a really heartbreaking moment, and he ultimately goes and dies in the mausoleum with his wife, where his wife and his daughters are at. And that really just leaves Sievers, von Franz, and Thomas to go on their last-ditch effort. Before all of this happens, though, as well on night 2, Ellen finally opens up to Thomas about her past with the Count. I think it's night 2, or it might be early on day 3. But she opens up about her past with Count Warlock and that he's assaulted her in the past, and that's why he's come for her. That's why he's obsessed with her. And you really see that she blames herself. She feels responsible for what happened. She feels like it's her fault. She feels that guilt and shame, and that's been reinforced by family members. I think she mentions that her father called her unclean, and yeah, this is something I have unfortunately heard so many times from survivors, that sense of guilt and shame, all of that. Now, also in this moment, there's something that's been talked about a little bit in what I've seen, and that is the sex scene between Ellen and Thomas. And a lot of people feel like it was out of place or awkward or inappropriate. And I can see that. I can understand why it would feel that way. I got a different read on it. So when someone can go through SA, it can really change the way that that person views sex and intimacy. So we can see people who set up really firm, rigid boundaries can become almost cold or indifferent to sex. We can also see people who are not that way, who are a lot more open, a lot more permissive, and almost seem to have no restrictions when it comes to sex. And we can see a weird blending of the two, where sometimes it's one way, sometimes it's another way. But what you also see is that for a lot of survivors, sex becomes a way of feeling comfort, feeling loved, feeling accepted, feeling valued by somebody else. And so to me, when I see Ellen wanting and initiating sex between her and Thomas, it makes sense, because likely to her, sex is comfort, it's acceptance. It means that in spite of telling Thomas all of this horrible stuff about her past, that Thomas still loves her, that he still values her, that he still wants to be there. And you also see, and she says in the movie, that she thinks and believes that their love can overpower Orlok, and wants to push back against that hold with, the purity and love and what they're doing against the evil darkness of what Orlok represents. But after all of this, von Franz learns the truth, and it seems Ellen also comes to know. And so they have this plan where the guys are going to go and destroy the coffin and sanctify the dirt and, remove Orlok's resting place so that when sun comes up, he has nowhere to go. This is a diversion, we find out, because what Ellen is doing is she's going to willingly give herself to Orlok. And so she's going to allow him to feed on her until dawn and lay with her until dawn, and then that's going to kill him. And that's what happens. And Thomas, he sadly arrives just in time to share one final moment with Ellen before she dies along with Orlok. The ending, man, it is really powerful. I'll be honest, I am torn on it because the romantic side of me was really hoping that they would be free of Orlok together, that Ellen and Thomas could find happiness together after overcoming the shared demon and could have that peace that they really wanted and they deserved. At the same time, there is a poignant beauty in her sacrifice that I can understand it would feel missed if maybe it wasn't present. As a therapist, I am even more torn because a part of me still wants that happy ending, because I do genuinely believe that regardless of what types of hell we've been through and what struggles we've had, there is still life afterwards. There is still peace. There is still happiness that you can find. But again, I also know that the wounds left on us can run really deep, and as much as I want and I believe that everyone can survive those wounds, I'm not oblivious to the fact that not everyone does. And so in that way, in the idea that Ellen dies from what gave her her trauma in the first place is unfortunately sad in how realistic it is. So I'm torn. And I think it's the best kind of torn because it's the kind that sparks debate, it can spark discussion, and can really allow us to reflect and look at media as being more than just media and what it represents and what it means to us. So, all in all, Nosferatu is a fantastic film, amazing for fans of gothic horror, Dracula, but also has a lot of good mental health connections and representation and things that I think a lot of people really resonate with. Currently, top film of 2025, easily in my top 3 for 2024, since technically it came out Christmas Day. But what did you guys all think of Nosferatu? Leave your opinions in the comments section below, and also let me know what you want me to cover next. Movies, video games, books, music. If it's something that resonates with you, and your journey in life, or you're just curious, hey, I wonder what a therapist would think about this. Pop it in the comments. I read all of them, and I would love to look through things. They don't have to be current films or any form of media. It doesn't have to be current. It could be classic. Could be from years ago. Whatever speaks to you and you want to see me cover on the channel, let me know. I'll read all the comments. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Until then, genuinely be the best you that you can be. The you that you want to be, and not what other people think you should be. Show kindness, compassion, and empathy to others. And remember, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. And sometimes media is just media. Except when it's not. Have a great time, guys. Bye.